Hey, crew, it's Patrick again. Welcome back. Thank you for stopping by and taking a look at this. We are 190-ish on the subscriber list right now, and we're going to hit 200 before we know it. So if you have any idea, I still have no clue what I want to do. If I want to do anything, when we do hit the 200 mark. But if you have any ideas, let me know. I'm also going to pose the question before we even start. Like it says on the thumbnail, what's in your STA toolkit? Because that's kind of what I want to talk about today. What is in my toolkit? And I know some of you are going, what do you even mean? What even is a toolkit? You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means, although I'm pretty sure it does in this case. But today, that's what we're going to be kind of looking at. And there's no real simple answer because, you know, it's different for everybody. And it depends on what kind of campaign you're running. So I'm going to show you the basics of what I use in basically any of my games, and I'll kind of break it off. Everybody's, and that's why I've got the curtain back behind me. I would like to be able to hold things up so people can see them instead of them vanishing into the virtual background, which is why I yield green curtains back up. Starts with the rule book. It could be this rule book or this one or this one. Or finally, this one, because this is also a core rule book. And depending on what your game is, that may be the one you're using. You're going to be needing a core rule book of some sort. For my last in-person campaign, which hasn't, I haven't played in that, that one kind of rolled up and died a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. It's been a while. But I was using the this, because this is the only rule book we had at the time when I first put that one together, was the main Starfleet core rule book. These other three we didn't have. A couple of these out of the way for the time being, because I have very limited space. But we also had we used the the departmental source books, operations, science, and command. Matter of fact, command for the longest time was one of my real big important ones, simply because it had so many different Starfleet space frames in it, which was something I sorely needed. The game I was running was set in 2295, right after Star Trek 6 in the beginning of Generations, but and Utopia Planitia hadn't even been thought of. I take that back. Aaron probably had thought of it already. I think that was one of the first things he thought of when he started writing. It wasn't in development yet. Thought of, yes. Developed, probably not. But we also did not have the player's guide, because if we'd had it then, it would have been enormously useful. I would have found great use in that. And, personally for me, the GM guide. Which is chock full of useful advice. But mostly it was the division books and the Starfleet core rulebook, because that's what we had. But it wasn't all about rule books either. We also had this little guy that I cooked up to hand out to the players. It also listed what I considered canon for the purposes of the game, which is in flux. How I was going about letting them do their species, but I mean, that was part of the toolkit. So I mean, your handouts can be part of the toolkit. It also doesn't have to be official, it doesn't have to be STA. It can be from other editions. I had some Andorian players, so this little guy came into play a lot. Very useful from the last Unicorns game. And then there are books just to make your players nervous. This is the Mirror Universe Guide from Decipher. It was released very briefly as a PDF, and if you were lucky enough to get it, I printed it out and bound it. Time travel source book from last Unicorn. But also things like ship blueprints. I need to get another set one of these days just so I can get an official, a real pouch for it. The pouch for this set died a long time ago, but I gotta tell you, I'm never getting rid of this set. As soon as I get a chance, this gets framed. That happens to be James Doohan's signature on the first page of my Franz Joseph Enterprise blueprints. But this would occasionally get pulled out because we were on board a Constitution class ship. The players were. I was just running a game on a Constitution class ship. They updated for the movie era blueprints, which also signed. So one of these days, those are getting framed once I get another set for steady reference. Those get used a lot, both in terms of at table visual references and things of that nature. Things that we didn't have that if we were playing today that I would definitely have include something I didn't have at the time that I would definitely use today. Not big on technical specs, but enormously useful as a visual reference, because not all your players are going to know everything about Star Trek that you do. See other things that have come up. This has wound up as one of my 23rd century references since the dawn of time. You want to know where things are? Want to know about planets? The Worlds book was also a Decipher book that only came out in PDF for a very short period of time. It's very handy, not necessary, but very handy. I use star charts instead of stellar cartography because stellar cartography is huge. And it's a lot easier to schlep star charts around because it is a slender little volume. I didn't have it at the time. I don't know what happened to my old copy. Horribly out of date by the time you get into some of the later movies and stuff. this version of the encyclopedia. I have the updated version. The 2-volume slipcase got ripped off. Was not happy. But actually, your toolkit does not have to include just the game books. Although, obviously, some of those help. For the 23rd century, we didn't have at the time the disco book, although I would have used it had it been there for that game because of all the 23rd century space frames. Nowadays, I don't really need command book or discovery book for the space frames for the Federation because I have this. And this is a thing of beauty. This is Utopia Planitia. In case you didn't know, this is the TOS Collector's Edition cover. I got that as a gift from my beautiful wife. But it's got all the space frames, almost all the space frames that I want for a 23rd century game. But that's basically what's in mind if I was playing a 23rd century game, especially post movies. It would be different than what it was. It would include things like it would include things like this, largely for some of the pieces of technology, which I think are still kind of fun, but especially for the new species. Those would have been a lot of fun. I would also, for the same reason, the Year 5 tie-in PDF that brought in the various facets of the Year 5 series from IDW Comics. But those would be some fun inclusions for the 23rd century. I also have several handouts that I've downloaded over time from the continuing missions site with various species for use in my game. Although actually most of those have been taken care of. The other big thing that we used on a steady basis were the for the 23rd century, the Alpha. I'll wrestle these into position, and Beta Quadrant books were huge go-tos. Mostly for species, but there's a lot of information that I wound up gleaning from there for some of the missions in that campaign. And I'd probably be using the Disco source book for the species. I don't, like I said, with Utopia Planitia, I don't need them for the space frame, but they've got the Barzan, the Kelpians, and the Saurians in Disco, and those are 3 of my favorite species. So we didn't have it at the time, but those would have been definitely involved, allowed in my game. But that was my STA toolkit, more or less, for the 23rd century campaign. Turning to my captain's log game that I'm working on right now. That one is set in the far future. That's set in the 32nd century. In the Discovery timeline, well, it's everybody's timeline, but it's specifically explored in Discovery. And that has wound up, changing that again a bit. For one thing, you only need one core book. That being said, it doesn't mean if you have the books already that pulling some of these others out aren't going to be helpful. These division books have come in really useful for side reference about various things that the departments do. Also, with the 32nd century, I think the other two quadrant books with Gamma and Delta are also going to be extremely useful, even though most of what I'm doing right this minute in the game is in the beta quadrant and a little bit in the alpha. But since the story I'm working on is heavily focused on what happened to the Klingons, because in seasons 4 and 5, you never even hear the word Klingon mentioned on Discovery in the 32nd century. So that's raised a lot of questions for a lot of people, myself included. So the first story I've got wound up involving a crippled, scarred up Klingon ship threatening a space station. And I decided to start exploring kind of what happened to the Klingons. So, as it turns out, the Klingon core book is coming in really handy just for some lore and for space frames and things of that nature. Even though I don't need the whole plethora of rules for Captain's Log, that's, the lore is coming in extremely handy. But since I'm playing in the far future, another one of these books, which if you can find these on eBay, I really recommend you grab them. Like I said earlier, they're not huge on technical information, if that's what you're after, but as a visual representation, especially of the 32nd century ships from Discovery, which really aren't covered in any modifius source yet. You got a little bit of information in Captain's Log, a few of the ship classes. Some of the, especially this rule about MTEC, the interstitial multiphasic transcomputonics talent for starships, which is basically just a trait in Captain's Log, but it's how Aaron's Pollier especially is accounting for some of the great advances, but the rules are explained here, and they're also explained in Captain's Log. There's a little more detail in this, but this would definitely be something that I would be using, the season 3 character pack. And honestly, I'd be using some of the stuff in here. And probably in the IDW book, one of my characters is amphibious. One of my NPCs is amphibious. And having kind of a reference in the Aquans and the Icosa in the Year 5 tie-in is really helpful. And those are the things that are turning up in my, the Captain's Log game is so new that I I've just started scratching the surface of things that are probably going to wind up in the toolkit. But what is in yours? Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see going forward. I'm going to be getting back to the actual play soon. I hope to have a little more progress. But let me know what you found useful in your games, and let me know what you want to do, specifically what you want me to do when we reach the 200 subscriber mark, which is going to be pretty soon. We're at 190-ish right now. Anyway, guys, it's been fun. Live long and prosper. Check down in the description for ways to help out the channel. In the meantime, appreciate you coming. We'll catch you on the next one. Take care.